Hi, I'm Jan Tinklenberg, also known as Jan Tink, and I'd like to welcome you to my YouTube channel and blog. Today I'm going to show you what I'm calling Color Lift Stencil Technique. All the supplies I have used today are listed below in my description, so you can find the supplies you'll need. The Color Lift Stencil Technique was an idea that I got from this technique I tried almost 2 years ago from Christina Werner. She used a wet paper towel to gently lift color already applied to paper through a stencil. I started wondering if there was an easier way to remove lots of color at once and without abrading the paper. I decided that Distress inks would make a perfect test subject for this, and I decided to try both Distress and Distress Oxide inks in the same colors to see what differences, if any, there would be, and there were definitely differences. For this card, I'm using the MARILYN stencil from the Simon Says Stamps, and later on I'll be using the Yay stamp set from Simon Says Stamps with its matching dies. I'm using Neenah white solar cardstock and Distress inks in Candied Apple and Spice Marmalade, as well as Distress Oxide ink. My first attempt at this technique used regular paper towels, and it produced a really noticeable texture from the pattern in the towel. So I tried something else, and this is my secret ingredient for this technique, and it's, ta-da, Scott shop towels. These have no embossed texture, so they work really well. They're also very absorbent, and they're really great for this technique, and they're very strong, so even if you buy a roll for this technique, you may find that you really love having them in your craft room. I've actually switched to using them to clean my stamps, and I can get a lot of use out of one paper towel. Now you see me creating the ombre background using Distress inks from top to bottom, blending softly in the middle to create a nice even gradation. And I'm using the Candied Apple Distress ink now. I use a little post-it note when I do this because I find that my fingertips will lift up the color because it's still wet, and then I get fingerprints everywhere. It's really messy, and this keeps that from happening. I find that Distress inks blend a little harder than the Distress Oxide inks, so it takes a little longer to get that nice even gradation, but it doesn't really matter a lot because we're going to be lifting up most of this color with this technique. And now I'm using the Distress Oxide inks in the same colors. And it goes a lot faster. It's because they go on a lot thicker and more evenly. And there we are. Now I'm going to cut this shop towel into a piece that will fit over the top of my cardstock, because I don't want it to be caught in the machine as it goes through the big shot. So I'm going to trim this down with my Tim Holtz paper trimmer. Just have to lift that up a little to get that thick paper towel through. And I'll just chop it into a nice piece. And I save the little pieces left just because they come in handy for things. Just for blotting up a little bit of paint or something. As you can see, I still need to cut part of it off. So I'm going to trim it down. And chop, chop. Zip. Off it goes. All right. I'm going to spritz this with just plain water to get it just damp. It doesn't need to be soaked. I want it to be evenly wet, so I just pick up whatever overspray and then I just sort of squeeze it, crumple it to get the water distributed through it nice and evenly. And I will hit any spots that I think are dry, usually the corners. I always get enough. Okay, once I have that ready, I can move on to the next step. Nice and wet. Okay, I'm putting the cardstock and laying the cardstock with stencil on top and the wet paper towel on top of that. And I run it back and forth through the Big Shot just to make sure that I soak up as much ink as possible. And I've done this with both pieces, and you can see the differences with the Distress Oxide and the Distress ink are very different. The Distress Oxide becomes more of a pastel color, whereas the regular Distress inks stays really bright and vibrant, and the color is lifted wherever the stencil was not. Now I'm going to put the stencil back over the top and tape it down, and I'm going to give it a little spritz of shimmer mist just to give it a little bit of shimmer. And I used some Perfect Pearls with water to create the mist. And wherever the stencil is, obviously the shimmer spray will not go. So I'm just going to hit that nice and lightly to create a nice shimmer over the background. And I'm going to do that with both backgrounds. And spritz, 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 spritz. There we go. And that's ready to go. I'm going to make sure that's nice and dry and wash the stencil immediately afterwards to get the shimmer mist off of it. Now I'm going to cut these with the stitched background or stitched rectangle from Simon Says Stamps, just to get a nice clean edge. And now I can start cutting out my yay pieces with the Simon Says Stamps yay dies. I'm doing 3 of them, and then I'm going to glue them up on each other so that I get a nice dimensional piece, and I'm doing the same thing with the small one. Alright, now I'm using some Ranger Multimedia Matte to glue all of these yays up, one on top of the other, to create that nice dimensional effect. And I'll do the same with, this time I'm trying out Stampin' Up's Fine Tip Glue Pen, which I actually found left some clear glue hanging out, and I ended up recutting all of these and doing it all over again with the Ranger Multimedia Matte because it doesn't show. Okay, now I'm going to stamp pieces that I'm going to use with these subtitles, and I've got some Simon Says Stamp cardstock here, and I'm going to stamp with Versamark and emboss with white. So I used my powder tool first and made sure I got a nice impression. Did the same thing with another one going in the horizontally instead, or vertically instead of horizontally. And doing the same thing here, just get a good impression with Versamark, and then I'm going to emboss with white embossing powder. And I like to use these little tools just to get the excess granules of powder off. And now I'm heat embossing them. There we go. Now we're going to create our greetings. I'm using this banner triple punch from Stampin' Up, which is a great punch. It lets you create the banner ends on any piece of paper, and I cut these to 1 inch wide so I could use the very narrowest banner cut on that punch. Now I'm going to glue these yay pieces on my banners, using again Multimedia Matte from Ranger. It's really hard to squeeze through the fine tips, that's why it seems to take a while. Alright, I'll glue that down right there. Yay! Just make sure it gets all nice and straight, and then we'll put some foam tape on the back. Just make sure it gets to be the right size. Oops, not long enough. I'll have to stick a little piece on the end just to make sure that it's got some at the end there. There we go. And you can see that I've mounted up the background on a piece of Neenah Solar White Heavyweight 110-pound stock. I'm making sure it's nice and straight here using my T-square. And you can see I did the same thing with the other card. I added a little sparkle tape to the bottom. I tried out this washi tape and decided I liked it there. Tried it there, decided I didn't like it, so I took it back off again. As you'll see in a minute. Nope, don't like it. Take it off. And then at this point, I decided to add some embellishment. And originally I had put these jewel drops from Tonic Nouveau, and I decided I didn't like them, so I'm taking them off at this point using Undo. This is really great stuff. You always want to test it to be sure that it will not remove ink off of whatever surface you're using it on, whatever paper. I did this on the piece that I cut off when I made the die cut it with this stitch square rectangle. And it took a little work, but I managed to get these things off. I just didn't like, they just didn't make it sparkly enough for me. And so it does leave a little spot where they were, but I'm going to go ahead and put some sequins on instead from Pretty Pink Posh, as I think they just lift it a lot. And the drops, they're pretty, but they just were too much like the background. So I'm going to go ahead, put those on with the jewel picker. And get them the right way up. And again, I'll use a little bit of mono multimedia matte, and just to get enough out of there, I took the lid off. Okay, I'm just going to dip them in there and put them on my card front. And almost done. One more. Yay! And so that's my color lift stencil technique. If you've enjoyed what you've seen, please give me a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe using the link in the upper right corner if you haven't already. Again, all the products are linked below. You'll also see some of my videos, which may also interest you, that you can watch by clicking, and you can visit my blog by clicking on my face. I promise it doesn't hurt. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.